He is an unemployed alcoholic. Pursuing recovery while facing rejection from the job market was painful. He battled identity crisis, depression, and anxiety, but he also found purpose. Now he helps people laugh while highlighting recovery and faith. He shares his story through stand-up comedy, professional speaking, and recovery support relationships. His faith-based worldview is built on the understanding of the Bible. He's far from perfect, but he does his best to love God and those around him. Let's talk with Aaron Sorrels today on Live with Tricia.
Welcome to Season 2, Laugh Your Past Off. Live with Tricia is an innovative platform that's been recorded before a live online studio audience. As a faith-based award-winning actor, director, author, and entrepreneur, Tricia Harmon inspires, listens, and joins the larger discussion. Get ready to engage for the next 30-ish minutes in innovative and authentic conversation with award-winning and renowned comedians from around the country, offering inspirational perspective and purpose as together we learn how to laugh our past off.
Welcome, Aaron. It is so good to have you. I am really excited about talking today and what we're going to talk about. So welcome.
Hey, Tricia, thanks. I did notice that you said an unemployed alcoholic in the intro there, and I'm actually the unemployed alcoholic. A lot of people wonder how that happened. And basically, I was battling alcoholism in my life. I was going through a season of unemployment, and then I started doing comedy. And just like that, I went from being an unemployed alcoholic to the unemployed alcoholic. So Tricia, thank you so much for having me here. Again, I am Aaron, the unemployed alcoholic.
The unemployed alcoholic. It's all about the articles. Well, thank you for that. You know, I actually met you at one of the events in Grand Rapids, and we went with my family to see someone else that the entire group was supporting, but I have to say you stood out in the entire lineup of comedians. And then we got to talking afterwards, and there was something about it, kind of knew that at some point in time in the future, God was going to bring us together to work on something together. And here we are. And so I am just thrilled. And I know that you are going to bless so many people with your perspective, with your vulnerability and transparency. And so thank you for just sharing a piece of your personal story with us. I'd love for you to kind of start at the beginning. Tell us, you know, you live in Grand Rapids. Obviously, you're right downtown. Tell us a little bit about your past, your upbringing, and what led you to where you are today.
Well, I was raised in a Christian household. My dad, who passed away about a year ago, was a Lutheran minister for most of his life. There was a period where he also he took a break from the ministry and worked at an organization called Michigan Protection and Advocacy, and he advocated for the rights of those who were battling mental illness and were actually in institutions. So he was a great man, and again, unfortunately, we lost him about a year ago now.
I'm sorry.
My mom is about the best person on the planet. I know a lot of people think that about their mother, but I'm right.
Yeah.
So my mom is just terrific. She is the most empathetic and loving person that I know, not just towards me, but towards anybody. So I grew up in a very Christ-centered, loving home, but I grew up in church, and as most people who have spent more than 10 minutes in the walls of a church realize, there's good and there's bad and there's ugly church, and I experienced all of that. Probably played into some of my early on self-esteem issues and things like that. And that probably in part was what drew me to alcohol. When I was in the 5th grade, I actually discovered alcohol at a friend's uncle's house who would share dandelion wine with us, and we'd get drunk and
the
get
good stuff.
Yeah. Nothing but the best years of dandelion wine. And but by 7th grade, alcohol was actually a pretty big part of my identity, and I carried that with me through most of my life. You know, along with the struggles with alcohol, or perhaps in spite of those things, again, I had a knowledge of who God was, and I was fortunate to have some strong relationships and genuine love throughout. My wife, I actually met when we were in middle school, So she knew exactly what she was getting into because at that time I was in full on rebellion. But
And was it widely known that you were alcoholic, or?
well, I think at the time they called it a stoner or a burnout or a
Okay.
partier or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that,
Yep.
but that a different title. But if it wouldn't be considered or called alcoholism, it would have certainly been called alcohol abuse. And and at very least, it was laying the groundwork and the seeds for a dependent relationship with alcohol down the road. My wife and I met in middle school, and we got married at age 19, which we had already had a little head start on our family by the time we got married, and which means now we're both in our mid 40s, and we're empty nesters. So I'd recommend teen pregnancy to anybody.
It's interesting because Byron and Hannah Trimble share the same love story. Their relationship started pretty young, and then they got married, I think, when they were 19 as well. And they've got 3 little kiddos, but and he grew up, a PK. And so isn't that interesting, the dynamics of what can lead people into comedy? So for you, were there any, other than the bullying, like what did that look like? Or the, I know you said you were kind of a stoner or a partier. Who knew? And other than, maybe the kids, did your parents know? And I guess I'm asking a lot of questions, but what do you think contributed to you? Was it just the bullying, or what, to you becoming an alcoholic?
There's no just easy math equation for the struggles that we have in life, and or the things that we turn to numb those pains. It's a lot of things. There's a whole vast thing. I think we have a tendency to want to put a nice story arc to everything and have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a big turning point one way or the other. And it's my experience that that's just not how it necessarily happens. There's a lot of factors that
A lot of contributing factors.
Yeah.
And a lot of longevity as to how we respond to those contributing factors, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure. There's it's not all good or all bad. There's a mixture of things and responses.
So you were an introvert, but did you have a quick wit? Were you like pretty observant and noticing small things that became funny, or what led to the idea that you would be a comedian?
I never pictured myself being a comedian, for sure. I mean, I was, I went to school and started down a professional career. I earned an MBA, and most recently I was the marketing manager for a big equipment manufacturing company. And, that was a professional route. All the way through there, I suppose I always enjoyed laughing and connecting with people, which are the two probably most important pieces of comedy. So maybe the foundations were there, but never was the vision there. It actually wasn't until I left my job to throw myself into recovery, to get back integrated with a good Jesus loving church, and start rebuilding the relationship with myself, the relationship with my wife, and my relationship with God. And through that time, I thought that might take a couple weeks and then I'd get back to work, but that's just not how it happened. A couple of weeks of unemployment turned to a couple months, and then 6 months, 9 months, a year of unemployment. And that was just a really hard time, but it was a good and valuable time. I mean, I was able to really dig deep into some of the things that, some of the deep hurts that caused me to turn to alcohol and other things for a numbing purpose,
Yeah. Well, not to kind of sit in the mire of it and wallow in that, but what did it look like? I mean, what was happening as your life was beginning to unravel because of alcoholism and perhaps the denial of it? What did that look like for you in your career and in your family, and how you handled it?
No, I mean, to get into the dirt of it, that's an important piece. So, let's talk about that. I mean, there's some tangible things, like, for instance, going to the doctor and finding out that triglycerides are through the roof high, cholesterol is high. A lot of these health markers were way worse than my age indicated, or my age warranted. I was prematurely aging myself because of abuse of alcohol. And it was trending bad. You talk about professionally, my work, in large part by my design, alcohol was a big part of it. So I was able to keep alcohol as a top priority, and still have that integrated into my professional work. But there were times that work would struggle. I mean, there are times when I would be out drinking very, very late, and you come in the next day and go to work, and you're not on your A game, to say the least. That was bad. But probably the most disturbing piece of all of it was I found that I was just becoming so self-focused and focused on me and my pride, and ways to honor and glorify myself. I was not heading in a good direction, and also alcohol was a big contributor to that, and I knew it, and I tried to quit alcohol, but I kept following the same little circle.
Yeah, the crazy cycle.
I'd go from the crazy cycle. I'd go from regret, to avoidance, and then I'd go into compromise, and then I'd go right back into abuse, and that cycle was something that, despite multiple attempts, I wasn't able to break. So,
and all out of self-effort. So your walk with the Lord at this point isn't strong. Your dependency on the Lord, I can imagine, is not there, because you're doing this on your own. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. Again, just like getting into the mire or getting into the muck, we want to have a clean cut narrative to say everything was good and then this happened and then everything was bad. And it doesn't work like that. It's the same way coming out of it. I had a relationship with Jesus during this. Was I completely submitted to him?
Right.
Obviously not. And I still am not 100%. It's just not that clean.
We're all
cut
honest,
of
aren't we all?
storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah. But I mean, in the midst of this, I loved God. I loved Jesus, and I knew He was Lord of my life. Whether I was taking advantage of the blessings along with that or not, that's a different story. But I mean, I loved God as an alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah. And I know we're talking about alcoholism, but as I'm listening to you, and somebody who has experienced the firsthand devastation of someone addicted to other substances, it really doesn't matter. Addiction is addiction. Going to something else to numb that emptiness, that hole, that pain, whatever that is. So yes, we're talking about alcoholism, but I think we're talking to just about anybody who's struggling. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I got to give a quick shout out to the recovery program that I was most closely involved with, which is Celebrate Recovery. It's a Christ-centered recovery program. There's something like 40,000 of them around the planet, but there's a ton of them.
We'll make sure we put that in the show notes too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a national link for Find a Meeting, and yeah, put that in the show notes because that's kind of like a one-stop shop for recovery. Because as you mentioned, the cycle is the same no matter what the substance or behavior is. It can be addiction to alcohol. It can be sexual addiction. It could be even one of the most common things that brings people to Celebrate Recovery is codependency. And codependency, which is a common word in the recovery community, but not so much in the everyday dialect of the rest of us. Codependency is when somebody draws their own personal value based on somebody else's actions or decisions. So if somebody is involved in a destructive pattern and somebody else is covering up for them or trying to change them or trying to fix them, that becomes a codependent relationship. And that can be just as addictive and just as destructive as any other substance abuse.
Yeah. And what a great segue. I'd like to go into, so what did the bottom of the barrel look like for you? No pun intended, but what was it that actually brought you to a breakthrough and turnaround? But before we begin that, I just want to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us and tuning in, because this is an epidemic. And regardless of what substance it is, opioid or, as Aaron said, it can be a sexual sin, it can be food addiction, it can be shopping, it can be gambling, you name it. And when you find yourself on that crazy cycle, it really stems back to what your mindset is set on. And so I just want to throw this out there, because I have recently published a book called Sand to Pearls. It is the acrostic for helping you navigate and transform sabotaging and negative dialogue stuck between your ears. And part 1 is out now of a 3-part series. Part 2 will be coming out very shortly. So if you look for Sand to Pearls, you will find, first of all, you'll find part 1, but by the time this is premiering, most likely you will find part 2 talking about no more victim mentality and the 5-fold principles of biblical forgiveness and how to seek, extend, and receive forgiveness. And so this is available on Amazon. If you hop over there, the link is in the show notes as well. This book will inspire you with biblical principles, plus equip you to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And that's a scripture verse that we're told to do. And it is written in a way that's very innovative. It's a methodology of action-packed, image-oriented, immediately recall, and you can lock and load it and retrieve it and apply it right there within a minute. And so let me just encourage you to hop over there, experience freedom, clarity, and a renewed mindset that offers you truth and a new level of sustained love, joy, and peace, and the success in your own life like never before. So back to you, Aaron. I'm thinking, number one, this really is relevant to your mindset. Where were you at in that moment where the breakthrough happened, where you were, like I said, at the bottom of the barrel, looking up? What did that look like, and what happened that brought you to acknowledge, accept, and start seeking out the recovery that you needed?
Yeah, probably the best words to answer that are regret and shame. And again, it wasn't everything's going along and then all of a sudden everything's going in a different direction. It's just not that that clear cut. It was a whole series of waking up in pain and with regret, and that's no fun. When that's the case, I found myself looking in the mirror and just not really liking who I saw. And to start having, my own personal identity eroding and my personal sense of worth and value eroding, that's just wildly destructive. Yeah. And again, to be trapped and not be able to break these cycles, it was terrible,
and you're still going to church. So there's, you've got the conviction from the Holy Spirit and the Word of God. And that's, Am I right? Were you attending
Well,
church? And
probably about a year and a half prior to me throwing myself back into recovery and church. Both my wife and I had kind of stepped away from the church. We did it under good intentions, at least in our minds. We were stepping out of the way so new leaders could emerge and that. So during that particular time, I was largely not plugged into a church community. I mean, I had Christians in my life, but I was not actively plugged into a church, for about a year and a half prior to getting involved in the recovery program here in Grand Rapids.
Yeah. So do you remember that point in time where life just immediately turned around because enough was enough? Like the buck stops here?
Yeah. Again, it's, when I think about turning points, there's a couple things that come to mind. I mean, one, I remember walking into Kentwood Community Church here in Grand Rapids, after resigning from the position I was in and deciding to get real about it all. I remember walking in there and just having this grace-filled reuniting moment with Christ.
Wow.
Where I felt really welcomed back,
Yeah.
and, and again, I mean, I've got a long history with church, and there's good and there's bad and there's ugly.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience of coming in broken and seeking renewal and restoration, man, that's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
So that was one, but another one, I remember one time, probably a couple of weeks after quitting drinking, where my wife and I are walking through downtown, and we walk past a bar, and I'm like, you know what, forget all this. Let's go in and have a beer. And, I just looking over at her, and her with complete love and support of me, looking into her eyes at that point and seeing her say, are you crazy?
Throw it all away.
Right. And we walked past that bar, and we walked home. And,
Wow.
and that was just one lightning rod moment that I realized this cycle of insanity without giving into it.
So share, a little bit about what your relationship was at that point with your wife. What's your wife's name?
Her name is Renee. Some of my counselors and advisors refer to her as Saint Renee.
I bet.
Yeah, because she's put up with a lot.
Where did that go? I mean, because you're still married, so she saw you through the worst of the worst. How was she responding as you were starting to see your need for recovery and yet still struggling with it? How did God give her the grace to just hang in there?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to even attempt to answer that for her. Other than to say that, God's grace is definitely a big part of that. And then hope, and then also, I was never mean to Renee. I may have at times been neglectful of Renee, and I certainly at times prioritized myself over her or our family, but I was never mean to her. There was never any physical abuse by any means, or verbal abuse or anything like that. I always liked her and was nice to her, and that goes a long, long way.
Yeah. What a beautiful picture. That's awesome. It's so important to have a network of support, and Renee, Saint Renee, bless her heart, to be there, not just with you, but through it, and experiencing everything from her perspective as well. And again, you know, you talked about the mental health side of it and the codependency side of it and all of those things. So let me ask you, Aaron, what did it look like when you began dealing with the alcoholism in your recovery program?
Recovery is a difficult road to go down, but it is so valuable. I mean, some of the things that I've gained from going through a 12-step recovery process or program, excuse me, you know, I wouldn't have been able to gain that insight and that wisdom through anything else. So I would actually recommend a 12-step program to anybody. If you don't think you have problems, you're probably wrong.
You're
Maybe
in denial.
is it? Yeah. So I would, earlier I recommended teen pregnancy to anybody. I was kidding about that. but the 12-step, disclaimer on that. But the 12-step program, I would highly recommend that to anybody. And if you're not quite sure what your issue is, what you're dealing with, don't worry, you'll find it. But for me, the first obstacle with recovery was just getting to the point where I could humble myself enough and admit that I was broken enough to seek help. I think, you know, pride or fear will tend to paralyze us and make us think that either the problems we're dealing with are too big or too small to seek recovery support and help. And so that first step was definitely to humble myself enough to walk through the doors for the first time. And what I found there was incredible. I found that as I openly shared some of the things that I was dealing with, people did not run out of the room screaming. People gave me a nod, a smile, sometimes a hand on the shoulder, and said, "Wow, we're gonna work through this." And that support community where people can be transparent. I'm going to say that again, where people can be transparent, because that is something that almost whatever circles we're running with, we just don't have the opportunity to be genuinely transparent. And
vulnerable. The vulnerability, the authenticity that comes from, you know, along with that transparency. It all is beautiful picture of grace and receiving and trusting in others, not looking for the validation, but then there it is. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you get that in spades, no pun intended for the gambling addicts out there, but you get that in spades at a recovery group because people have just been through it and they're done with pretending, and it's just raw, gritty, and real, and there's just something beautiful about that. So I'd say that's kind of what the recovery journey looked like for me. Boy, that's the 50,000 foot view for sure. But, you know, bringing myself to a point where I was willing to humble myself to step into a community that I knew people were seeking recovery in. And then to just experience what it's like to take off a mask and be real and open about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So.
Yeah. And then there's the healing that starts happening, and it's not a Band-Aid. It's not like you put this Band-Aid on and then you can rip it off and go on your merry way. It now is a mindset. It is a transformation, and that kind of leads into the thing that you are all about now, and which is mental health. And
that's you know, as you go through a recovery process, people refer to it as peeling an onion, where every time you peel a layer, there's another layer underneath. I was about a year and a half into recovery when I started to take a look at my own mental health. And I got to tell you, Tricia, this is a long story. I know we're kind of towards the end of our time here.
But you know what? I think it's so worth telling. So if you don't mind, I think this is going to be absolute critical for people to hear. So could we just continue talking? I'll kind of wrap us up for this episode. Let's bring this into part 2, another episode. Would you mind staying with me and let's continue our conversation and talk more about the mental health and how that is so crucial in all of this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because again, that's a rabbit trail that warrants a little bit more time than a 2-minute answer.
Yep. Well, I want to give it due diligence. So thank you. And thank you for listening and watching Live with Tricia. You know, Live with Tricia I'm asking you, is it worth keeping online? Is it worth keeping on your podcast? Then we need to know from you. We would love for you to head on over to livewithtricia.com/partners and show us what it means to you, because we are totally listener and viewer supported. Each episode that you are listening to, whether it was in season 1 or season 2, is being brought to you by underwriters. And so would you please consider becoming a cheerful giver, as we call it over there, at any level, to help encourage and spread the laughter. You can check out all the levels of incentives to match at www.livewithtricia.com/partners. Today's episode is underwritten by Noble Pearls Media, where inspirational creatives influence culture by representing leaders in ministry, media, and the marketplace. For your film, modeling, voiceover, keynote speaker, and career coaching needs, contact Tricia Harmon at noblepearlsmedia.com. Well, this has been already a great conversation, and we're not done. We're going to pick this up on our next episode. We're going to continue talking. So thank you so much, Aaron. And let me just say that you need to come back. You got to come back for the goods, because we kind of gave you Scooby snacks. Now we're into the main dish right now. So return back for our next episode. Make sure you get notifications, subscribe to our YouTube channel and the podcast as well. You can find Aaron at theunemploymentalcoholic.com. Use that handle for all of his social media platforms. Aaron, is that also your YouTube channel URL as well?
Yeah. Or I've got links to all the different social media platforms on the website. So the website's the best place to start if anybody wants to find me.
And we will also have them all in the show notes below, so you don't have to go far. And we have show notes on our website as well as the podcast. So you will not have to look far to find him. He's got events coming up. Aaron, just give us a couple things that are coming down the pike for you as far as gigs that you have going.
Well, one of the things that I am super excited about is a thing that I'm partnered with Laugh Fest. Laugh Fest is a comedy festival here in Grand Rapids. It's put on by GIGGLERS Club, which is an organization that supports people through cancer and grief journeys. And they just bring the whole community together to laugh through some uncomfortable situations. So as you may imagine, that is a perfect fit for what I try to do with helping people laugh while highlighting recovery and faith. And we partner together. We're doing a recovery showcase. We're doing it in 2 locations this year in West Michigan. We're going to be in Holland and in Grand Rapids, and that'll be on March 10th and 11th.
In time for a hint of spring.
Yeah. It'll be beautiful weather, no doubt.
I'm sure.
Yeah, which doesn't really matter because it'll be indoors.
There we go.
Yeah, but there's an update on that, and those are free events. We want to do those. The comedians, every comedian involved will have a recovery story. We're not necessarily talking recovery. We're just coming together to laugh. But it's a great opportunity to kind of end stigma around recovery, to just bring a whole community together and laugh with people that are in recovery. So,
and I'm sure you can find those events, whether it's through Eventbrite or through Facebook as well, or other social media, and obviously your community calendar. So take a look at that. Aaron, this is great. I can't wait to get into part 2 here. But for now, I'm Tricia Harmon, and this is Aaron Sorrels. This is Live with Tricia, a production of Noble Pearls Media. Thank you for listening and watching this episode in season 2, Laugh Your Past Off. Make sure you're getting notifications so you won't miss next week's episode, where we come back together and talk about mental health as a recovering alcoholic. We wish you all the best. Remember, laugh your past off, because laughter truly is the best medicine. We'll talk to you soon.
Wasn't that a great episode of Live with Tricia? Be sure now to follow, share, and please leave a comment on our social media platforms using the handle Live with Tricia. You can make more seasons and episodes possible. Become a cheerful giver. Experience the joy of giving back at any level by linking to livewithtricia.com/partners. Let us know how this is impacting you in your daily walk. Have a question or suggestion? Drop us a line. info@livewithtricia.com. Join us next week for another amazing episode of Live with Tricia, where together we learn to laugh our past off. Because after all, laughter truly is the best medicine. So go ahead and over-medicate yourself with it today. I'm Misty Jordan. God bless.